But the mandatory ones mean you must provide, yeah.
And what happens if you refuse?
If you refuse, you can be arrested and brought to the station. And then you'll be asked to give a specimen of blood or urine or breath at that point. People sometimes think, well, if I don't give a sample, they've got nothing to test. And if they've nothing to test, they can't prove that I had anything in my system. And that's true. But if you fail or refuse to give a sample, you're going off the road for 4 years, which is the outside maximum. The maximum you could be ever put off the road for in drink or drug driving and blood, urine or breath is 3. But if you refuse, you get 4. It's really punished if you refuse. So the idea you might avoid it by not giving a specimen is absolutely disastrous. You'll get more than the maximum for that. People don't realize that cannabis will stay in your system for a long time. So you could be potentially prosecuted and convicted for something today that you did 2 weeks earlier. And it's not acting on your system in any bad way. You're not obviously intoxicated. You were at the time, but not 2 weeks later. But you could be put off the road for that thing.
So you could smoke a joint on a Saturday night and the following Thursday?
Yes. Yeah, the following Thursday, like there's no way that the cannabis joint is still acting on your central nervous system and making you intoxicated in any way. You're fine at some point the next day or the day after that. You're perfectly, you have all the outward appearances of being sober. But if you're stopped at a checkpoint and they do a saliva test and it shows up, you will be prosecuted and you could end up being put off the road for a year for that. So things that happened 2 weeks ago could come back to haunt you. If they suspect you're under the influence of drugs, they'll take a blood sample. And what they'll do then with the blood sample is that that'll be taken, that'll be packed into a little box and it'll be sent by registered post, or sometimes in Dublin they'll deliver that day, the guard will deliver the sample to the Medical Bureau of Road Safety, and they're operating out of the Health Sciences building in UCD. But oftentimes for drug driving, the analysis for alcohol in the blood comes back 0. Like there's no alcohol in your blood. And in that situation then what the Medical Bureau do is that they take that sample of blood and then they add a preservative to it and they stick it into a refrigerator. And in that situation where it's in a refrigerator, it's stable for months because the testing for drugs takes much longer. What's happening now a lot is drug driving. And that's where people have had something, we'll say, on a Saturday night, and they're stopped at one of these mandatory checkpoints 3 days later, even a week later. They have to give a sample of the saliva. The saliva is then put into a machine which tests for up to 8 or 9 different drugs, cannabis, benzodiazepines, amphetamines, methamphetamines, ketamine, all that sort of stuff, and cocaine. And if that sample of saliva shows up the presence of any one of those things, you're going to be arrested right there and then. Then you're brought to the station and the sample of blood is taken from you. And if it subsequently shows up in the analysis from the Medical Bureau of Road Safety, you could be facing a year off the road.